What are the best psychological mind tricks you know? Story 1. My boss at a retail store taught me this one on how to deal with customers when they won't stop talking to you because they have nothing else to do with their day. While they are talking with you, start walking towards the door while responding to them. They will naturally follow. You open the door for them while still talking to them, and they will walk through. You follow. Now you are both outside the store and you say, "Okay, well, have a great day," and walk back inside. Story 2. When doing one-on-ones with people, especially when you want to get to the bottom of something, say nothing. Ask an initial question. Let them talk. Say nothing in reply or something small that they can't change the tangent of the conversation. Most people become uncomfortable and will fill the silence by talking more. You gain a lot more from this that you would in some instances than by asking probing questions. Doesn't work on extreme introverts, though. They don't mind the silence. Story 3. Stop talking. If you are negotiating with someone, even over something small, and it's not going the way you want, just look at them and listen. They will get to a point where they have laid out their position and know that you are unhappy with it. Let them be uncomfortable with the silence and keep talking themselves into a worse position. Works very well with sales guys delivering less than optimal offers. Story 4. If you are getting frustrated, force a smile. I think it's motor neurons that control this. Could be wrong. Anyways, your brain recognizes some actions as connected to mind state. Tense muscles = anxiety, smiling = happy, and will operate backwards. You can relax your muscles to gain calm, and you can smile your way to relief from the anger response. Source: teacher who smiled at a lot of kids. Story 5. When dealing with irrational people, customers who are dead set on creating a scene, treat them as if they are a mentally challenged person who is spiraling. Meaning, don't take it personally because it's not about you. Even if they try to personalize it, try to figure out their actual issue and try to help solve it within reason, or set their expectations if their demand is way beyond reasonableness. Don't return fire by matching their tone and aggression. Keep calm and focused on the actual issues, not any outlandish behaviors. Above all else, remain friendly and as helpful as possible in relation to any legitimate issues. In my long customer service experience, this will work about 95% of the time. Your calm equanimity and helpfulness in the face of their tirade will remove the feedback loop they want to create to stoke the confrontation, pop their temporary insanity bubble, and leave them quiet, or at least impotent, when they realize you're not going to play their game. For the 5% who are unmanageable, you just have to ignore their caterwauling, address any issues you can, thank them, and send them on their way. If they continue to engage, you'll need to bring in reinforcements, managers, co-workers, security, if needed, and do your best. Story 6. When someone is emotional and telling you why, respond by briefly matching their level of emotion. Then step it back with progressively softer statements ending in a questions and a possible solution. It's showing them that you are hearing them and care, while subtly descaling. Story 7. If you find yourself in a stressful situation and need to clear your mind, try to recite the alphabet backwards in your head. From experience, it helps shift your focus and calm you down. I've done it that many times that I can recite it backwards as quickly as I can forwards, which has the added benefit of impressing my kids immensely. Story 8. I have 3 that I use all the time. When I screw up, I tell myself, well, I was always going to make that mistake because I didn't know any better. Thank goodness that I do now. What lesson can I take away from this? It sounds super cheesy, but it has become almost reflexive. Similarly, when I feel something very strong and uncomfortable, I try to get curious about it. One of my friends who is a fitness nut once described a metaphor for it. When doing Pilates, she often comes across a particular part of the range of motion in the exercise that is really difficult all of a sudden. That's a weak point being discovered in the moment, a place that can use some work. Emotions are like that too. When something hurts all of a sudden, there's something to look at, explore, and work on. This lessens the punch for me, and it takes me out of the flooded state where I just want to blame. Lastly, I remember that my emotions and my immediate thoughts are not under my control. That sounds like it could be self-indulgent or dangerous. But the second part is that my actions are. There is no need to feel guilty about a thought that crosses my mind. It's what I do with it that dictates what kind of person I am. Edit. Reading the thread, I see that this is mostly about influencing other people. Oh well, I have never had much luck with that, haha. Story 9. If you have trouble motivating yourself to do something like learn a skill, instrument, language, etc., tell yourself, okay, I'll sit down and do this for just 5 minutes. A lot of the time, you'll end up going for much longer than 5 minutes, but even if you don't, it's still 5 minutes of practice in whatever the heck you wanted to learn in the first place. Story 10. The read technique. A few months ago, for example, I got my neighbors to admit to putting water in my gas tank by telling them I had security camera footage of them doing it, and that I wouldn't call the police if they admitted to it. I don't even have cameras and I still reported them to the police anyways, LO. Story 11. I once read a suggestion about customer kung fu that I love. Basically, if someone calls you upset about something, if you downplay it, they aren't going to feel heard and will escalate their upset. But if you overplay it, oh no, your cable was out for 2 hours? How frustrating. I am so sorry you went through that. They are more likely to feel heard and respond reasonably, possibly even coming down from their initial anger to, well, it wasn't really that big a deal. People really just want to feel like you're appreciating the difficulty they had. Story 12. Assimilation. Mimicking naturally and subconsciously what the other person is doing. I find myself standing with a wider stance when talking to customers who are smaller than me. Also, good eye contact when someone is explaining something to you. Lean into the boardroom table when they are explaining it subconsciously shows interest. Also, subtle head nods after points are made. Tone of voice when speaking to different people on the phone. Older people are Mr. or Mrs. Insert surname here. Softer voice when talking to women. More fun and laid back when speaking to people my age. Edit. Also, when you're having a heated exchange or just a tense moment, and there is a stop in conversation, just maintain silence. It puts the other person off, and generally the first person to talk is the one that is now on the back foot. I had about a 45-second standoff with the old accountant at work. We were both using the same tactic. It was the toughest 45 seconds ever, and it ended with the conversation just stopping. Luckily, it was on the phone. Story 13. Delivering bad news is always easier with the sandwich method. For those who are unaware, this involves layering the conversation with good, positive angle to start, followed by the crux of the issue, then ended with another good or positive angle. John, I need to talk to you in my office. I've been reviewing your ideas about... They're fantastic. Your brother just called and said your father passed suddenly. Don't forget, this Friday is our work party, and everyone is super excited that you'll be there. Story 14. Use primacy and recency to your advantage. Primacy is the first impression people have of you. Recency is the most recent impression people have of you. These are most impactful as people construct their current opinion of you. For example, if you nail your job for the first month, primacy, and are really on top of it right before performance evaluations, recency, your boss won't pay much attention to the middle period, even if you perform at a MH level. They will focus on their first and most recent perceptions. Story 15. I often talk with people who are upset about something, so I use the following 4 strategies. Start off with the phrase, so what's going on? It's casual, chatty, and lets them set the agenda. Tell them, so you're upset about underscore, 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 underscore. They will either confirm this and feel heard or tell you no, and follow it up by what they are upset about. Repeat the last couple of words of their sentences. It keeps them talking and they feel like you understand what they're saying, even if you don't. If you ever need to get information out of someone, tell them you already know the secret and just make something up. The urge to correct you will be too great and they'll spill the beans. Story 16. When talking 1. Look to see if they are mirroring your body language. Change position or pose and see if they subconsciously follow your lead. If they do, they are consciously or subconsciously trying to be socially pleasing to you. If they don't, they aren't interested in you or the convo. They actively look down on you, or are trying to game the social dynamic the same way you are. You can then begin steering a conversation in ways that help you figure out which it is. It's a fun game to play when you're trying to come up with a reason to stay interested in social chit-chat. Gamify it. Story 17. When you are questioning anyone, whether it's a criminal or a kid and you are unsure of their innocence, start with 3 questions, unthreatening, related to the person you are speaking to, like how their day was, how their favorite sports team is doing, etc. Then follow up with a blunt question related to investigation that can be answered with a yes or no. I noticed some cookies missing from the jar, and you and Scruffy are covered in crumbs. Why is that? This is very effective at getting a guilty person to completely shut down or trip over themselves trying to come up with a lie on the fly. Story 18. If you want someone to like you, ask them for a small, inconsequential favor. Most people will agree to a small thing, and unknowingly, by helping you with something, they are investing a bit of interest in you, and are thus more likely to look favorably upon you in the future. It can be something as easy as asking them directly to pass the salt. If you are in a highly engaged social situation and would like to leave soon, yawn. The fastest way to find the right answer to a question is to state an incorrect answer. You can poke the back of someone's neck with two pens at the same time, and it will feel like a single pen poking them because there is only one nerve that carries sensations from this area. If you are in school and have to do a presentation but think that yours is underwhelming, volunteer to go first. No comparison will always net you a better grade, even if no extra credit is offered for going first. This is a social phenomenon, but have you ever been to a fair where they have one of those really big jars of gumballs or something, and you need to guess the amount? It turns out, individuals fare unpredictably at this task, but you are unlikely to find a guess that's too close. But if you add up all of the guessed amounts and divide by the number of guesses, you will find that you get a number that is very, very close to the actual amount. The more participants, the closer the average is to correct. Group thinking is powerful. If you've ever seen one of those moons that just looks really big as it's rising/setting on the horizon, it's an optical illusion our brains play on us somehow. If you were to stand on your head, the moon would appear normal. In Best of 3 Rock, Paper, Scissors, the best strategy is to play the same thing all 3 times. Story 19. Hold out your hand. Pretend you are holding a salt shaker. Focus on the imaginary salt in the shaker. Take the salt shaker and shake the salt into your open mouth. Really focus on the salt. If done correctly, you can taste the salt. Works about 60% of the time for me. You may need to try shaking the salt into your mouth slower or faster to get it to really click and work. Closing your eyes helps. Edit. For some people, imagining 2 salt shakers, one in either hand, shaking salt into your mouth is more effective. Story 20. I keep candy in my office and used to have it in my room when I worked in student affairs. Once people know you have it, they'll come to you. Then you can engage with them and build rapport without having to pursue them. They'll tell you a lot of things when they get used to the candy chat ritual. I also keep a magic 8-ball, which is a wonderful conversation starter. Story 21. I teach throwing tomahawks at summer camps. Anytime I see someone throwing left-handed, I always have a tomahawk to the side. If they don't get it to stick, I always make a little show of, oh, you're using the right-handed tomahawks while being left-handed. Here, try this one. And they always throw better after that. Then the adults always come over after asking me what the difference is. Story 22. One thing I like to with people about is height. I'm relatively tall at 6'3" inches, and occasionally I'll be talking to guys who are noticeably shorter around the 6-foot mark, and they'll ask what my height is, and he'll claim about 6 foot. So funny to see their reactions claiming they are 6 foot, so I therefore must be way taller. I'll chime back, okay, maybe I'm closer to 6 1 inch, and they start to lose there as they are hell-bent on ensuring their 6-foot status. Story 23. When your server introduces himself or herself, pay attention and remember their name. When they take your order, thank them using their name. It both shows that they matter enough that you would remember their name, so they will check on you more frequently. And if they are not good servers, you may get better service than most because they know you remembered their name and could complain to management. Story 24. Ignoring someone when they try to antagonize you. When someone says something stupid, turn your back and walk away like you don't want anything to do with them. When someone says something you didn't agree with, don't respond. Just stare at them. It unnerves then. 48 Laws of Power is also a good read. Story 25. When I would ride in my younger sister's car, she would blast her music, and when I asked her to turn it down, she would turn it up to spite me. Now, instead of asking, I speak juice below the volume of the music, and she'll turn it down to hear me. Also, she always hated my playlists and would whine when I played music, so I would put one song she liked in my playlist, start with that one, and shuffle. She would never complain about the exact same playlist she was bitching about before. Story 26. While it's not necessarily an answer, it's still important. The bystander effect. If something like an emergency happens, there may be a crowd forming around it. The bigger this crowd, the less likely it is for someone to help the person in need. But if one person from this crowd starts helping, more will follow. So if you're ever in a crowd and you see someone needing help, be the first to help. Because no one else is going to do it, more will follow. Story 27. Shower someone with compliments if you need something from them and you know they don't like you or respect you. There was a guy at work who was in middle management. He was always a condescending dick to me. I figured out his vanity buttons and smashed them. I gave him power over me, but in reality, I had power over him because he would do whatever I asked him to do as long as I fed his ego and made him think it was in his best interest. Story 28. A random question to derail a rant. I work with customers. They'll start complaining about something or another thing, and I mention something completely unrelated out of the blue, and it short-circuits their brain. They forgot about what they were saying. Story 29. I learned this after multiple instances of freaking out thinking I'd forgotten to lock up our shop. If you need to remember you had done something, like locking up properly. Repeat a bizarre phrase 3 times after completing the task. It can be anything, but vary the words each time. When you think back, you'll innately hear the words and know you've done whatever it is. Story 30. Opposite action. If you've got no energy, you'd probably actually feel better going for a walk. If you feel like isolating yourself, you'd probably actually feel better reaching out. If you feel lazy, knock an easy task off the to-do list or clean one thing, etc. Obviously using common sense. If you're tired from physical exertion, then you should rest. And if you've been dealing with people all day, you might need some alone time. But if you're in a depressed pile of blah state and you haven't actually done anything in a while, you'll feel a kind of gravity pulling you to continue that, even though it's not going to make you feel better. Story 31. When someone has the hiccups, ask the most random question. For older married people, I ask what kind of underwear they wore on their wedding day. Younger people, what underwear did you wear on your last date? Really young people, what pajamas did you wear last night? People focus so hard to remember that they forget they have the hiccups. Story 32. Do not self-focus. What I mean by this specifically is focusing on your own body and what you think other people are seeing. We are really bad at judging what we think other people are seeing, and they're having lots of attention on yourself. Are my hands moving enough? Is my voice shaking? Am I sweating? Am I blushing? Can they see me trembling? What am I going to say next? Only serves to make anxiety worse. I'm a therapist, and it is one of the biggest maintenance factors of social anxiety disorder. But it's also helpful in other contexts. Sports psychologists teach their athletic clients to not self-focus as well. The way to do this is practice shifting your attention internally to externally. Name things in the environment, for example. And during social interactions, really try to lose yourself in the conversation. Focus on the other person, what they are saying, what they seem to be interested in. How can you find out more? Story 33. My boyfriend used this on me for an embarrassing long time before I caught on. Instead of asking me what I wanted to today or where I wanted to go for supper, because my answer many times had been, "Oh, I'm up for anything wherever you want to go," he would instead say, "Guess where we are going today?" I would name a place, and if he liked the idea, he would say, "I got it." If not, he'd say, "Guess again," until it was a place we both wanted to go. LOL. Was a great little workaround for 2 chronic people pleasers. Story 34. I did 911 for a very large police department in Florida that, during training, I was warned would have me dealing with a lot of angry people. The best trick I had to calming people down was telling them, "I'm here to help you. Let's get this taken care of together." And it worked every time to the point my trainers were founded. One trainer had been there over a decade, was literally mouth agape, asked me, "How did you do that?" I was fired after 4 months for being too nice. Story 35. If someone accuses you of something serious that you know is BS, take it seriously, like really seriously. "Hey Bob, there's money missing from the cash register. Did you take it?" "No." "I think you did." "I see. Well, that's a pretty serious allegation. And if you genuinely believe I took it, I think you're obligated to immediately report it to management. Why don't we go and speak to them together and make sure they pull the security tapes as well so that we can get to the bottom of this ASAP? And then walk straight to the manager's office and say, "Hi, Dave. Tony says that there is cash missing and believes I took it. I absolutely didn't. But in any case, these are serious allegations which could have serious consequences, and this needs to be dealt with properly. I understand there is a process to go through here. I assume the company will be contacting the police to file a report, and I would appreciate if you could provide me the name of the officer contacted and the report number. Given the nature of the allegations being made, I would like to request a copy of today's security footage." And then hold that line rigidly. If they start to retreat from the allegations, then chase them down, figuratively speaking. Make sure they know that people talking will have to face consequences. Equally, don't make threats that you don't intend to follow through on. Story 36. A few things that I haven't already seen posted. Asking, "Does that sound fair?" Learned this while working in sales. Not for an outrageous request, but typically you can talk to people about doing something that might slightly disfavor them or their position. People don't like to say something isn't fair and risk sounding like a child, so they just end up agreeing. Just talk through your point and end with the above question. Making a point to empathize with someone to disarm their hostility. This works especially well when you aren't the actual cause of their frustration, or if you can shift blame. Learn this in customer service. "Yay, John, I'd be really frustrated if that happened to me too." I've had people straight up apologize for coming at me guns blazing. Praise someone for an emotion you want them to have in order to elicit it. I know someone that is really great at this, and I think it takes some practice to deliver well. She would talk to someone she was familiar with, and if they were really frantic/hyped, She would say something like, "Thanks for being my rock. You're always so calm and patient that it helps me stay centered too." Watching that person bring their emotions back into check unintentionally just to be worthy of her praise was like some voodoo magic. Story 37. I used to study biases, so I have a few I like to use. One works in an interview. When they ask you what makes you good for that job, you list off your traits, but then immediately ask them what traits they think someone would need to be successful at that job. You have just listed your good qualities and they are fresh in their mind, so they often start to list most of the things you just told them. It kind of tricks them into saying and thinking you are well suited for the job. It's also just a good question to ask in an interview. Another is when you have to ask for something from your boss. Check in with them first. Be specific if you can, like, "Hey, I know it gets super busy this time of year. You have a lot on your plate. How are you doing?" This doesn't even have to be done in a sneaky way to get what you want. Being the boss can be stressful, and you are potentially about to add to that stress. If you've just been supportive, they are way more likely to give you what you need from them. My colleagues always get me to ask for things. Story 38. The sandwich feedback. If you have something bad to tell someone, tell them something they did good first. Then you get their attention. Proceed with the actual feedback you want to give them. Then finish by something positive to show them they are being good at other stuff. People will more likely try to work on the feedback you provide them if you recognize they are good at other things already. It shows you are trying to help them grow. Obviously, the 3 comments, good, bad, good, have to be related. Can't be like, "You dress well, you're a very bad cook, you're great at math." Story 39. If you get uncomfortable receiving compliments, don't deny any compliments you're given, but instead praise the other people involved. And you can diffuse the tension while making yourself look even better. If there's just you involved, you can thank the person for their kindness. Story 40. Struggling to make decisions in a group or to encourage clients, customers, just do something. Doesn't need a lot of effort, doesn't need to be right. People are much more willing to tear down someone's work or ideas than step out and come up with one themselves. It'll move things along much more quickly. I tell my team to do this when clients, we work in a creative agency, are dillying over making a decision. Do an hour or 2 of the work as if they had made a decision, then hand it to them. They will tear it apart. And in the process, make decisions they've been pondering for weeks. Story 41. Purify your mind with meditation and yoga. Remain as authentic as you can, even in challenging situations. Don't lie. Don't harm others. React in a way you would love others to react to you. Quickly, you'll summon people with similar values in your environment. After a while, people with lesser values will adapt to yours, but it takes determination to remain true to your quest. Story 42. Remember little details that people tell you about themselves or their lives. For example, their birthday, their spouse, kids' names, anything. If you ask them about one of those details the next time you see them, you will not only pleasantly surprise them, but they will quickly begin to like you and look at you favorably, which usually leads to them agreeing to nearly anything you ask of them. It's freaky how often this has worked for me, not even doing it out of seeking something in return, just trying to be a decent human, and it's been quite rewarding. Shout out to author Dale Carnegie for that one. Also, doing the triangle stare on someone, whether someone you just met or someone you're interested in, absolutely works. The sheer disorientation that comes over them when you do it is hilarious. Story 43. As a sound engineer, when working with an act, they might ask for more vocal in the monitor so they can hear more of themselves. You can literally act like you are turning the knob in CK if that sounds better. 99% of the time, they will say it sounds better when you haven't changed anything. Story 44. If someone is telling you about a situation and there is a third party involved that isn't there, ask the person telling the story. And if I was talking to the other person, what would they say about this? You will often get a more accurate idea of what happened, but keep in mind that they will often be quite sarcastic about it. Oh, they would say that I was being unreasonable, and they would say that they didn't have enough time, and so on. But through that sort of sarcastic filter, you will often get some good glimpses of truth. Story 45. Expressing yourself in terms of what you want. Like if someone asks you to do something, a lot of people try to give a gentle response or justify why you don't want to do it. But once you start justifying, you give people the opportunity to argue back. If you say, "Sorry, I can't buy this car, I've had a lot of expenses recently," the salesman can respond with, "That's okay, you can pay in installments." If you say, "Okay, I've decided not to buy," then there is very little they can do against that. If they ask why, just say, "All things considered, I've decided not to buy." You really can just stick to that in most situations. What I really like about this trick is that in addition to being very powerful, it's also very honest. So it's not really a trick at all. Story 46. Found this out by accident, but sometimes when there's someone I really can't stand, but I'm forced to be around them and play nice. I'll act so fake and be so nice to them. Eventually, they'll be extra nice back to me, and then we're legitimately just buds ol' mao. Story 47. I was a contestant in a speech contest once. We did not know the question that would be posed to us until they asked us in our appearance once on stage. In the green room, we, the contestants, assembled. We were quiet, reserved, as we were all competing against each other. The lone female in the group stood up and stated, "I'm going to build a bridge of communication." The three other gents in the room kindly looked at her and nodded and said, "Okay." I spoke first on stage. Each contestant remained sequestered until their turn on stage, so they would not hear our responses, nor hear the question ahead of time. She came on stage. They asked the same question posed to me. "If you were lost in the jungle, what would you do to survive?" She started her response with, "I would build a bridge of communication to the civilized world." She gave a great response. She won by unanimous vote. I was the victim of the Jedi mind trick. Story 48. In about the past 15 years or so, I've noticed that more people are likely to disagree with you just because they think it's the opposite of what you think. I think it's a desire to prove they have original ideas as often as you, instead of agreeing with something you thought of. This is a huge mistake, disagreeing just for the heck of it. It makes using reverse psychology entirely too easy. With everyone's desire to quickly disagree, all you have to do is act like you want the opposite of what you really want. When they disagree with you, they're really agreeing with what you wanted to start with. An easy win on your part. Story 49. There were 3 specialized techs where I worked at my last job. A very attractive guy, a very attractive gal, and me. Now don't get me wrong, the other 2 were very competent as well. They just also happened to be super attractive. When someone called in an issue and were irrational or unreasonable, we would send the guy if a woman called it in, and we would send the woman if a man called it in. I was sent when we knew this wouldn't work on the customer, because I was knowledgeable and quicker than the other 2. It is shocking how well this strategy worked. I once tagged along with the guy. We had a client that was so angry with their new machine, and it was because they didn't pay attention in their training and refused help over the phone. When we got there, the guy tech fielded her rage and then jumped straight to complimenting the pic of the woman's baby on her desk. He took her from raging to googly eyes in just a couple minutes. The rest was gravy. Story 50. Tested method to walk into crowded streets. Someone's walking your way and you're not sure which way, right or left, said person will go. To adapt their path, people need to know which way you go, and they'll do it by looking at your eyes. So just choose a direction and look at it. Someone's walking your way and you just know that person will try to push you out of the way. Abandon the fight to win it. Just look somewhere else while walking. It's not an ego game about who's going to move now. The other pedestrian is left with a simple choice. Bump into some unaware pedestrian, you or avoid you. Story 51. Mind palaces. Seems like a bit of a gimmick. If you've watched Sherlock, you'll understand. But it's an ancient technique that genuinely works really well for remembering things. Think of a place you're really familiar with. For me, it was my childhood home, and place things you want to remember in an order somewhere in that palace. So for me, thing #1 to remember was on the first step of the staircase, thing #2 on the second, etc. I'm really bad at remembering things, but by doing this, I just think, what did I need to remember? Let me check step 4, and boom, remembered straight away. Story 52. Tons of little ones as a server with like 20 years experience. You can do stupid little things like a slight nod or shake of the head to influence someone to agree or disagree. Offer something with a hand up if you want the person to accept, an open offering gesture, down if you want them to refuse. Gives a "you're fine and don't need this, right?" vibe. If their food is taking a long time, oftentimes thanking someone for their patience can go over a lot better than apologizing for the wait. This is very situational. There's definitely situations where that could make things worse. But for the maybe mildly annoyed but not yet upset situations, praising them for a positive quality, patience, gives a less negative vibe and makes them reluctant to prove you wrong by acting impatient if it takes longer, LOL. It's not mind control, obviously. If someone has a definite opinion, you're not going to change it, but it does influence people that are closer to being on the fence towards the direction that you want them to go. Story 53. Whenever someone says something inappropriate or out of pocket to me, I don't say anything back. I just stare at them for 3 seconds. Usually they apologize or change the subject. It was a great trick when I was still working in retail. Something else that worked surprisingly well was rephrasing people's demands to a polite question. I once had a guy demand, "Give me a fork," and I answered, "Oh, you would like a fork? Okay." By the second or third time, he also wanted a napkin and a straw. He was suddenly a lot nicer to me. Story 54. Make plenty of educated guesses. People tend to better remember when someone is right while ignoring the wrong ones. It's a common element in how many psychics work. They might have a pretty bad rate at being correct, something like 30%, but people will ignore, and the psychic will quickly move on from wrong answers and instead latch on to the few that they actually get right. Done properly, people will think you're far more knowledgeable and insightful than you actually are, when in reality, you're just taking more chances. Story 55. If you have a conversation with someone and take a very small step towards them, so little they don't instantly realize, they will take one back to maintain a distance without noticing. If you do it slowly and super little by little, you can walk someone down a hallway before they notice. Used to do it to my friends all the time and tell them, yet they never could catch it. It's hard not to laugh while doing it though. Story 56. At work, if something is taking a while and the customer seems rude or fussy, when I get back to them, I always say, "Thank you for your patience," before they have a chance to complain. Pretty much always gets a positive reaction, like they don't mind. Before I started doing that, if I didn't address the wait at all or said something like, "Sorry, that took a minute," then I didn't always get a polite response. Story 57. If someone is freaking out, freak out more, and they will calm down to help you. E.g., a person said something is too hard. You put on a scared voice and say, "You're right, it's too hard. We'll never get it done." They'll calm down to let you know it's okay, and then they can start making decisions. When people are panicking, their brain is fighting for survival. You give it a task, calming you, and it stops fighting once it achieves the task. Then their executive functioning kicks back into gear, and off they go again. Story 58. I had to medically interview a lot of people every day, and I found that if I started off asking, "How are you today?" they kind of wander around and don't come to the point. But if I ask, "How are you feeling today?" they get right to it and tell me what I need to know. That one little word saved me a lot of time standing there while they ramble on, blah, 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 blah. Story 59. Repeat the last thing someone says in the form of a question. For example, an acquaintance you want to know better says something like, "I love that movie because the ending was beautiful." Your reply, "The ending was beautiful." It's amazing how easy this is, and how much info you can extract and open up deeper conversations. They know they're being heard this way, and it makes you seem genuinely interested in what they are saying. It's a very powerful way to get folks to like you, and makes it easier for folks who struggle in conversations. Also great when flirting. Story 60. Framing things as a positive. So instead of saying "sorry for the wait," say, "Thanks for your patience." The first one gives an opening to the "well, you should be sorry" crowd, while the second one sets an expectation of civility. It works well in social situations as well as work situations, and is especially great if you have issues with insecurity or anxiety, because you acknowledge the issue while keeping the vibes in the positive. Story 61. I like stopping people's hiccups with a mind trick. If I notice someone has the hiccups, I ask them, "When was the last time you saw a white horse?" I then specify it has to be solid white with no markings. People get really into it and start pondering hard. I normally get a, "I'm not sure I've ever seen a white horse." And then I just say, "So how are those hiccups?" And they're always gone at that point. It only works on a person once, though. It doesn't work once they're aware it's a mind game, but it's a fun party trick to pull out occasionally. Story 62. There's an old Southern cure for the hiccups. It won't work on yourself, and it only works the first time on someone else, but I have a 100% success rate. When someone around you has the hiccups, all you need to do is say you don't believe them and ask for them to prove it by hiccuping right now. When put on the spot and asked to control the hiccups completely stop. It's on you to sell the cure by really pressing them that you don't believe they have the hiccups and you need the proof right now. If they hiccup once while you're still kind of getting the pressure going, just say you didn't hear anything and you need proof. Lay it on thick. I've never not been able to stop someone's hiccups using this method if it's never been used on them before. Story 63. If I want a better perspective of my problems, I think about it as if a stranger or friend has come and asked me about them having the same situation. Then I find it easier to make an objective and reasoned response than an emotionally invested or distracted one. Shopping for a big or non-daily purchase, do research. Give it a week. I'll probably end up finding a better alternative, and in either case it buys me time to really reflect on wanting the thing, because if you can't be bothered to look into it, then you probably didn't want it either. Applying the previous trick can reduce impulse buys too. Time is your best friend in not buying something. Didn't get the car? Wasn't meant to be. Something else will come along. Salespeople are trained to psychologically coerce you into a purchase. You are just a means to an end. Be critical if they don't listen to what you say or try to divert you into something else. Take a friend who doesn't care about the car. Tell them what you want them to do. They may notice things about it you may miss or are distracted from, and will also be able to cut through the salesperson too. Similar goes with house hunting. Having someone over your shoulder going, yeah, but look at this, or they didn't answer your question, is a good pause for thought on what decision you are making. Beware of shopping fatigue, too. You can look at things until you just sort of give up and buy something. Be specific in your needs can help refine and determine what you want or even if you want. Preparing your own mind to enter a situation is pretty important to the success of any trick or tip. Story 64. For the person who is constantly throwing a fit or seeking instruction while they should just figure it out on their own, aka the coworker who wants everyone to do the work for them. You speak to them like you're talking to a kid who is throwing a tantrum or has withdrawn. Just imagine them as a kid. Don't use the cutesy voice, just the same sort of words. Either they answer their own questions or they get frustrated that you're not giving them a direct to-do list and leave you alone. Eventually, they either learn to leave you alone because you're useless to them, or they actually learn processing skills. Works for yourself too. When you're at your wit's end and you just want to rage quit or feel like you want to break down, take a step back and imagine your kid self or teen self, depending on what you feel you're looking at, and speak to that version of yourself as though you're speaking to some random distressed kid. Works. Story 65. Don't do the emotional work for somebody else. It relieves them of the responsibility. When somebody reports to you something that was done to them that was obviously unjust, if you assume the role of being angry and indignant on their behalf, suddenly the person who was treated unjustly begins to defend the person who offended them. It's frustrating. They are allowing you to do the emotional work so they can disagree with you. Have a neutral response and let the person assume their own emotional work. Story 66. I got a job just by being confident that I was capable of doing it. I lied and said I had experience. I paid very close attention during the training phase and just figured out on my own. Between that, just having an overall likable demeanor and getting along well with everyone, I worked there over 3 years and had a going-away party thrown for me when I left. So I guess just being confident that you can do something, like so much confidence that you trick yourself into believing you are 100% capable of doing it. Story 67. If you're at a party and you need to remember someone's name, associate their name with something ridiculous. For example, if their name is Matt, imagine them as a giant doormat. Your brain is weird and loves memorable imagery, and you'll remember Matt the doormat way better than just Matt. Another favorite, if you want someone to feel comfortable around you, subtly mirror their body language. Cross your legs if they do, lean forward when they lean in. But be careful. If they scratch their nose and you do it too, you'll look like you're doing a weird mime act. And the classic, if you want someone to like you, ask them for a small favor, even if you don't need it. Ben Franklin was onto something when he asked an enemy to lend him a book. It tricks their brain into thinking they must like you if they're doing you a favor. Just don't go too far. No one's going to like you more after you ask to borrow their car. Story 68. Here are a couple. I'm an IT guy, and I once shared an office with the girl that did the internet leads. Most of the staff, when they called and got no reply, would call her, and the minute she passed me the message, I would call them back right away. Over time, they would all call her first instead of me, and I got all my messages handled by her. It made my mornings pretty quiet till I arrived at the office. Another trick I did was have a fan positioned behind me, blowing toward anyone sitting in front of my desk. Most PPL could only stand or sit there for a few minutes before their throat and eyes were to dry to continue. The third and best trick I know is to use sugar. If you are dealing with someone who is upset, resetting their blood sugar almost always calms them down. So while in a heated discussion, offer them some fruity beverage, or if you are prepared some snack that is sugary and irresistible, as soon as they take a drink or bite, you will see the fight in them dissolve away. Story 69. If you interrogate someone, and if you think that person is lying, let them tell their story from the beginning. And a few minutes later, just cut them and ask a completely unrelated question. Later, ask something about what happened after the incident in question. Then let the person start in the middle of the incident, and this time, ask more relevant questions to see whether the story holds water. Liars come up with intricate stories, and the idea is here to interrupt their storytelling and interpret the resulting clues. An honest person can easily come back to the main story, although being bothered by unrelated questions. However, a liar gives away nuance in body language and some conflicting details about their story.